Prophetically enough, as soon as I released an Ishin-related video, we finally got some info on the ever-so-mysterious Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who sold the— the man who erased his name, that's the one. I'm woefully late to the hype train, mainly because I was holding out for a potential new teaser at Summer Game Fest. Nevertheless, even with the few quick descriptions and the 6 leaked screenshots, we can already deduce much about how this game will function, even before the patiently awaited new RGG Summit comes along. So, let's do a deep dive on what was made available thus far. Number 1. The combat styles. Right off the bat, we have seen screenshots for 2 specific styles that Kiryu will have, those being Yakuza and Agent. Clearly, the team took some inspiration from the Judgment games, both in the color palette and the general utility. The Yakuza style was described as the heavy hitter of the two, presumably having similar properties to Tiger, if not being a one-for-one copy of the most recent Dragon of Dojima style. Though it would make sense to give Kiryu a brand new fighting style to double down on the idea that he is an undercover agent, as his old fighting style would have been easily recognized by a number of fighters from the underworld. What's really interesting though is the other style that was mentioned, which was titled Agent. This is the range style with stronger mobility options, presumably akin to Crane. Now, personally, I'd wager a guess that the gameplay of Agent will be a combination of Crane, obviously, coupled with Rush and, hold on to your seats, Shinada style. Give me a second, I swear it'll make sense. Having combat styles in Yakuza that have a strong reliance on weapons in their execution is a rare luxury, since if we don't count the samurai games, we only really have 2 styles that prominently featured weapons in their core moveset, those being Slugger and Shinada style in Yakuza 5. The main difference is that Slugger was technically 95% weapon-based, while Shinada had an extensive moveset while he was barehanded as well. Considering what was said about the utilization of gadgets, like the electrified wires, this style could finally have Kiryu's use of equipment in the Dragon Engine lead to something balanced and fun, as opposed to the ridiculous stat buffs from Kiwami 2. The reason why I've tossed Rush style into the mix here is mainly to emphasize the focus on fists in most of Kiryu's movesets, as Yagami's Crane style more so relies on flailing kicks, regardless of some shared hit properties. Overall, having 2 balanced styles, as opposed to just copying the styles from Zero, was a good call in my opinion. And if the gameplay from Lost Judgment is anything to go by, these 2 will be polished to perfection. Subject number 2. The map. As of right now, 3 locales have been confirmed: Sotenbori, Ijincho, and a new area dubbed the Castle. The first 2 were to be expected, considering that we've seen Kiryu in these areas during the events of Yakuza 7. But the thing that piqued my interest was the mysterious castle that was mentioned. I'm a sucker for one-off smaller scale areas exclusive to a single game, hence why I love Shinseicho. But there's one more funny thing that I would like to point out here. Obviously, we've seen Kiryu will be in Sotenbori, which is located in Osaka. You know what else is in Osaka? Hell yeah, it's ninja time! Okay, this is just blatant guesswork, but try to imagine RGG tying one of the most random reveals in the franchise to the now crucial Daidoji faction. It will be hilarious for all the right reasons. That aside, this should also mark the first canon to the mainline Yakuza game not to feature Kamurocho in some capacity, which is worth pointing out. Don't worry, it'll probably return in its entirety in Like a Dragon 8. But even this tiny oddity makes me infinitely more excited about what Gaiden could offer still. Number 3. The engine. This is probably the biggest point of interest for many people, as Ishin Kiwami marked the first use of the Unreal Engine, in lieu of the old standard, which was the Dragon Engine. And while it is aesthetically pleasing, especially during nighttime, the gameplay aspect behind it had many issues going for it. From flickering textures, to input lag, to prompts in minigames appearing even 10 seconds after their associated sound effect, it was an admittedly rough start. Based on the screenshots we have here, it could theoretically be either of the two engines, but there's a number of things that make me think that this is still the Dragon engine, just pushed to a visual extreme. The bluish filter on the agent screenshots reminds me a lot of the PlayStation 4 release of Judgment, back when we still had that recognizable graphical overlap that was absent from the PS5 remaster. Coupling that with the idea that both Sotenbori and Ijincho are present, alongside a brand new area, it would definitely be easier for the team, resource-wise, to polish the game without worrying about how those respective cities would now function in a brand new engine, or perhaps having to present a toned-down version of them, akin to the version of Kamurocho from Yakuza 6. Plus, Lost Judgment gave us one of the strongest combat styles to date. If this really winds up being Kiryu's last beat-em-up entry, he deserves to go out with a bang, as opposed to the whimper that was Kiwami 2's combat. Number 4. The main story. Considering that this will be a game on the shorter side, we don't have too much to go on, and that's good. This is kind of like what Ratchet & Clank Quest for Booty was back in the PlayStation 3 days, a smaller scale tie-in to keep us satiated until the next mainline drops. If you're curious about the actual narrative correlations between Yakuza 6, 7 and Gaiden, there will be an info roundup towards the end of the video, as the only thing that was added in the supposed PS Store description is that someone will try to reveal Kiryu's identity, which sets up the events of Gaiden in the first place. We need to find out who this mysterious figure is and how they know about our faked death contrivance. On the other hand, the topic of side activities is one we know a lot more about. Obviously, there will be a new karaoke song, and if it's anything like Ichizu Samurai, i.e. the latest new karaoke track in the franchise, we'll be in for a fun time. Which, oddly enough, ties into another new feature, the live-action cabaret. This was something that was revealed long before the leak, as RGG had streamed the hostess auditions for months, and fortunately, Kei-san was one of the winners, deservedly so. I think the live-action element will be a nice way of making these segments more interesting, as the hostess sub-stories have started to become far too formulaic with time. Admittedly, Yakuza 6 changed them quite a bit, but that didn't suddenly make them masterpieces of gameplay aspects overnight. We all do them just to get to Amon, right? But this is a nice change of pace from what I can tell. Since I've mentioned Amon, we might as well address something that was labeled as the quote-unquote submissions in the article. There are two ways we can interpret this. Number one, being that this is just the new name for sub-stories, as this is technically a spin-off, so everything should be rebranded. It's essentially what we've seen in Judgment, when the sub-stories were labeled as side cases, for example. The other option is that these sub-missions will function like the Hitman missions in Yakuza 3, or the contracts in Kenzan. Essentially, another list of activities that reward you with money and equipment, without necessarily having in-depth narratives tied to them. It would definitely fit this new lifestyle Kiryu had adapted to, and double down on the secret agent who's also a guy who'll do anything for the right price type of mentality that the Fixer had. We also saw Pocket Circuit being mentioned in passing, which was a bit of a surprise. Perhaps this is what Fighter was up to before he managed to finance Dragon cards in Yakuza 7. My guess would be that this type of Pocket Circuit will largely draw from the old formula in Zero and Kiwami, but with a nice neon finish to play in with the aesthetic of the title overall, kinda like Arselios did in Lost Judgment. Or maybe Fighter will become our secret partner on the side. You never know with RGG. Lastly, there's the question of the general release details. We've known for a while that the game would release on previous gen and current gen consoles, excluding Nintendo systems. Yeah, what else is new? Also, the supposed release date would be November 11th of this year, though that is subject to change, as we've seen with the early access DLC option from Ishin Kiwami. One thing that is worth pointing out though is the option of getting a free digital PS5 copy if you possess a physical PS4 disc of Gaiden. Now, normally, if you bought a digital version of a newer Yakuza game on PS5, you'd get both the PS4 and PS5 versions immediately. So it's uncertain if that feature will return as expected considering what was said earlier. The reason why I'm pointing this out is for my fellow trophy hunters who may be watching. As you'll recall, towards the beginning of the current console generation, the so-called auto-pop option had been made apparent, where if you obtained all the trophies on the PS4 release of a game and then upgraded to the PS5 version, your trophies would pop immediately. Lost Judgment definitely followed this logic, and maybe even Ishin Kiwami, though I can't confirm for the latter. The point is, even though Gaiden was said to be shorter than your average Yakuza game, but longer than the Kaito files, if you are an avid trophy hunter, knowing that the option of doubling will likely still exist might be of use to you. Who knows, maybe the team will actually make the side content here infernally grindy, like it was in Ishin. Hell, maybe Gaiden won't even have a platinum at all, like certain games. But you can definitely expect me to give it a go regardless, cause these games are way too fun not to be 100%ed. Now that all of that has been said, I'll now throw in the earlier mentioned 2 to 3 minute narrative roundup of everything from the old trailer to cap this off before sharing some final thoughts. If you know what happened back then, or want to avoid spoilers for Yakuza 6 and 7, skip to this timestamp. So, here's what we know so far. The Daidoji faction was initially spearheaded by Daidoji Minoru, a decorated war hero from the Second World War. Unbeknownst to the public, he initially commissioned the construction of a secret weapon to turn the tide of the war in Japan's favor, a battleship named the Yamato Mark II. While it never wound up being used in the war, the circumstances behind its existence presented proof of a massive government conspiracy that could collapse the political landscape of Japan as a whole. So, Daidoji and Iwami Shipbuilding decided to keep its existence from everyone, and labeled this ship as the Secret of Onomichi. Kiryu wound up uncovering the secret by accident, and was thus forced to fake his death and save his family from the Daidoji faction's potential retaliation efforts. As of the footage from the first Gaiden trailer, we know that Kiryu not only faked his death, but also wound up working with the Daidoji faction, at a dojo not too dissimilar to the area where Minoru died in Yakuza 6. Kiryu is given the codename Joryu and an escort assignment. As of the events of Yakuza 7, we can deduce that the assignment in question was related to protecting Masaru Watase once he was released from prison, as he would then go on to disband the Omi Alliance altogether. This explained the need for Daidoji's protection services, as the faction had been backing many prominent groups from the shadows for years, including the political party Aoki Ryo belonged to. As for the trailer for Yakuza 8, it inferred that this would be a story with two protagonists, Ichiban and Joryu, with the premise behind Joryu's story being that he is a person with a heavy past that will need to be resolved, alongside a person with his whole life ahead of him. And finally, here's some personal guesses for the game. Gaiden was said to be similar to the Kaito files in structure, but generally bigger than that, also being described as being half the size of a mainline title, so probably 10 to 15 hours in length based on my personal estimate. Apart from that, a word that was briefly mentioned by Yokoyama was style, which, based on the remainder of the sentence he said before he stopped himself from revealing too much, could mean one of two things. The first being that Gaiden would stylistically emulate Yakuza 6 in regards to more succinct exploration and core gameplay. The second interpretation would be that he alluded to a combat approach of a style-switching nature, as was presented in games like Yakuza 0, Kiwami, Lost Judgment, and most recently, Ishin Kiwami. That's essentially it for the old info. And that's all we know. Or at least all that we can confidently deduce thus far. I hope this video helped you ease the wait until the summit, where we might get a full trailer to debunk or even confirm some theories that were shared here. Whatever the case, thank you for being here, and I'll probably see you once the summit itself wraps up, if I'm not too busy still bouncing off the walls with excitement. Until next time, take care of yourselves and have a great day. Cheers!